Hi, everyone. First and foremost, we've come such a long way from panels in COVID. This is one of the most high-tech panels or high-tech platforms I've been on in so long. As Leah mentioned, my name is DeMarco White. I am with the Recording Academy. I'm really excited to moderate this topic that I'm really passionate about. I spent a lot of my career really focusing on developing resources for young creatives like yourselves. And so I'm really happy that this amazing group is here to share them with you. There are an abundance of resources and groups out there that can help you navigate the music and live entertainment business. They range from trade orgs to unions to community groups and more. Here in this panel today, you're going to learn more about the important skills and trainings that can really make you stand out in this dynamic business. And so I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to toss it over to our panelists today who are going to introduce themselves, tell us their title, and a little bit about the companies they work for before we get into this really incredible topic. And so, Allyson, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allyson Newman. I am a composer for film and television, and I am also the co-president of the Alliance for Women Film Composers. It's great to be here. Sorry if my sound's a bit dodgy. I'm having some headphone issues, but I will mute and try and keep it as cool and quiet as possible for everyone, but nice to see everyone.
Thanks, Allyson. Rhea, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Risseghem. I'm representing SOLID, which is Society of Leaders in Development based in Nashville, Tennessee. My day-to-day, I'm a label manager for The Orchard, Sony's music distribution arm for independent artists and labels.
Awesome. And Chris, last but not least.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everyone. My name is Chris Wares. I am a professor and the assistant chair of the Music Business Management Department at Berklee. My background has been a marketing executive for several major distributed labels, publishers, and also a business development consultant for various companies in the music industry.
So I think a good way to start this conversation off before we talk about sort of the different resources and skills that are needed to really be successful in music is to really talk about our own careers and our own passions and how they got us here. And so Rio, starting with you, would tell us how you got to sort of in the position you are in right now. Has this been something that you've always wanted to do, or like many of us in music kind of just fell into and decided like, I kind of like where I am?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. In my 31 years of life, I've been an artist. I've been a flight attendant. I've been a client services coordinator and now a label manager, and a brief stint of artist management in between that. All of this to say, all of the experiences that I've had on the music industry side truly have been propped up by not only my own knowledge, but also the community that I've been able to foster around myself of like-minded people who are super passionate in what they do. A little bit about my career journey, starting from the artist portion, had always played music growing up, had been in a couple bands in college, got into a really cruddy artist management deal at one point and realized that my true passion in life was to prop up independent artists and labels. And I didn't necessarily know what that route looked like, transparently, because right out of college, and I didn't major in the music industry, I was a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for a long time, picked up every music business book I could until finally I could talk the talk, and then finally found all of the great mentors that were able to help me find my way into this industry, starting with really people in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, who started a radio station. And that was kind of like my first interest into artist development and how radio can be such a big part of that, to finally when I moved to Nashville in 2019 and was the first employee who got hired with Symphonic Distribution for their Nashville outlet, to where I'm at now, which is being part of a more global distribution circuit with The Orchard. But as we have more questions, I'm sure we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how all of that happened. But that was kind of the way that I got to where I was truly through the help of friends, as well as just being very passionate about what I do.
Yeah, what a way to sort of kick off this conversation, because I think a lot of times when we're talking to different people who are in the music industry, we often find that their path is nonlinear, right? And whether you decide if you wanted to go to undergrad or you want to have an internship or you just want to sort of work your way up the chain, like there's a myriad of pathways for you to take in order to be successful in music. Chris, talk to us about sort of your pathway and how you ended up here.
Sure. I actually started off as a sound engineer and music producer. That's what I did in my undergrad. And I also did a minor in business. And I was doing quite well, but it was at a very transitional time in the industry in the mid-2010s, where we were dealing with Kazaa and LimeWire and peer-to-peer file sharing. And, you know, also parallel to that was a lot of the home recording technologies were coming out, and really, you know, really powerful computers. And so what was happening is that I'd be working on a recording project for months and you know, doing the overnight sessions and all that kind of stuff. And when I would put my blood, sweat, and tears into a project and hand it over to the artist, unfortunately, for most of the artists I was working with, nothing would come of that. And I can relate to what Rio was saying, where it was just like, okay, well, I need to find a way to support the artists and in turn support myself. And so what happened was that, and this ties into this conversation, I started to learn everything that I could. I read all the books on the industry, the Passmans, the Braebecks, the Baskervilles. And I really just started to dive into it. I started to network. I started to read all the trade magazines, the billboards, the music connections. Eventually, through networking at an event, I met one of the presidents of one of the large independent record labels in the city I was living in. And, you know, I was able to get a mentorship. And on my first day of that mentorship, you know, he brought me into the label offices and we were chatting, and you know, he's asking me a bunch of questions. And at the end of the meeting, you know, I was kind of confused because I was saying to myself, hey, this is a mentorship. I'm supposed to be asking you questions. And then he looks at me and he says, you know what, this mentorship, I'm really sorry, Chris, it's not going to work out. And I was so disappointed. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, you know, I can tell that you put a lot of work and effort and time and intention into learning about the industry and being involved in the industry. And so he says, I don't want to give you a mentorship. I want to give you a job, and I want you to start tomorrow.
Wow.
Then, you know, started my foray. So next thing you know, I'm working for one of the largest independent record companies in Canada. And, you know, the rest is history. I started from the bottom, worked my way up to the managing director for marketing. I was doing national campaigns. I eventually ended up in academia by accident. But that's another story.
Your pathway intrigues me because it's a really good sort of combination of doing the work, being at the right place at the right time, and knowing the right people. And so I feel like those sort of will be really are several North Stars that are going to guide today's conversation. So we're definitely going to come back to that. Allyson, tell us how you sort of got to be where you are right now.
I guess, you know, I think I started learning music when I was really young, and I was obsessed with Madonna when I was a kid. And when I was in my early years of high school, A League of Their Own came out, this film that she was in, and I went racing out to see that movie. But what I really discovered in that was, like, it was the first time I became aware of, like, a soundtrack, like, the underscore of a soundtrack and what that music was doing emotionally for the story. And I suddenly, like, it dawned on me, oh my God, someone does that job. That sounds like a job I want to do. And so it kind of started from when I was quite young. And then I was already writing when I was young. And then after school, I did my undergrad and master's degree. But I was still, like,
I think we're only catching. Is that only me? Is that me, everyone? Is that? Are you, okay. Allyson, I think we're only catching every other word of what you're saying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you hear? You can't hear me?
Yeah, no, we can hear you. It's just you're going in and out.
Oh, I don't know why.
It sounds clear now, so let's take this moment and just continue from where we were.
Okay. So basically, I left Sydney and I came to the US, and I went to USC to do postgrad in film scoring.
Awesome.
And from there, I just started assisting other composers. Can you hear me, or am I cutting out?
No, you're doing good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just started, assisting other composers, and eventually making connections with people, meeting directors, working on short films, little projects, and slowly but surely a career starts to build up. But it's in film scoring, that's a thing that takes time. It just takes, it's like a steady sort of, a steady one step at a time. And then sooner or later, you start having a few credits under your belt, and more opportunities sort of bring you to where I am now, I suppose. Yeah. You and sort of in the juxtaposition of everyone else's pathway, you talked about really being finding a program that would surround you with the things that you needed the most, right? So if we're talking about film scoring and sort of pursuing a certificate at USC, you're in the program that's building your network, developing the skills, and actually providing you with those opportunities to be able to pursue that specific career. And so as this panel focuses on the resources, right, you have to be able to at least have a sort of inkling of what you want to do, and that way you can position yourself correctly to be able to develop those skills. And I want to continue the conversation to talk about, it seems like everyone on this panel, and I'll include myself in this, where we are now, we're somewhere where we wanted to be, but we didn't always know we were going to be, right? And so, Rio, for you, what continued to motivate you to sort of move forward as you're trying all these different things? Because even to start as an artist and then decide that you want to sort of be sort of behind the scenes or behind the stage, that's a huge transition. And so how do you sort of and please rephrase me if you feel so inclined to do so, but how do you sort of either let go or have the conversation with yourself of I did this, I feel okay with sort of moving on and going in this direction? Because I think a lot of artists, especially I'm sure that are on this call today, have that trouble. They set out to be an artist. Typically, artists want to be artists since the inception of birth. And to say I'm going to actually move on and go in this direction is a really hard conversation for them to have. And so, talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like through my life of that transition, going from being an artist for a while and having some portions of success with it, but at the end of the day, it was interesting. When I realized that even as an artist that thought she was savvy, still got taken advantage of by someone that was more savvy on the business end, right? And so when I started thinking about my North Star of I always come back to something my dad taught me when I was really young, and it's really a Boy Scout phrase of leave the campsite better than you found it. And so when I was thinking of that, I was I can write a ton of songs and they may touch people, they may not, they may have portions of huge virality, and there may be moments where things don't always hit the audience that you hope. But what does hit people is advocacy for an independent artist. What does hit people is helping someone alongside their career, so that the pit holes that I found as an artist, I would hope that I leave the music industry better than I found it when we all eventually retire or not. and am able to look back and say, I made a bigger impact by shelving maybe some of my creative talents to be able to benefit artists along the way. And to be fair, I will say I still perform. I just play in a wedding band now, and it's a blast. And I get paid probably more than a lot of independent artists, unfortunately, playing corporate and wedding events. But all of this to say, I mean, it was not an easy road to come to terms with. But I found so much more joy when an artist that had no wherewithal or understanding of the business that they were going into was able to gain some insight from me. And they have gone back and said, Rio, thank you so much for giving me that insight. I probably would still be stuck in the same mode that I am now instead of continuing to grow my career. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that's how I come to terms with it anyway, more than anything.
Yeah. Such a being to pay your bills. It's something of it all. No, that is such a real statement. And it makes me really think about just how, one, you never know what's going to happen in life. But the other thing is that everything is so transferable. And when you were in high school, when you were in college, and like you're working these different sort of jobs, and you're not really being able to understand, like, how am I going to, like, we all say to ourselves, like, how am I going to use math? I'm taking algebra, and I'm never going to be able to use this, right? It's kind of in the same way when we have, like, we're working, you talked about sort of being a flight attendant. And I'm sure there are the people skills and the patience that you were able to learn as a flight attendant. I'm sure you use every day, specifically when you were doing artist development, but also doing distribution. And Chris, my question for you is, going from, or not even going from, because I'm sure you're still producing and a sound engineer, but that's such a technical skill to develop. And when I think about somebody who's in academia, there's so many soft skills that have to be utilized when engaging with students and when engaging with curriculum and sort of building a community that fosters sort of the generation that we're speaking to today. So talk to us about how you were able to sort of transfer your skills as a sound engineer to what you do today.
To what I do today, it's really interesting. One of the beautiful things about starting in a more creative space, and I use the word creative very cautiously, because, when we're talking about artist development, brand development, marketing campaigns, I think that is my current outlet for my creativity. But to come back to, those transferable skills, I think it was extremely valuable to me going from the studio to working in marketing to then working with students. And I would say, even though I'm in academia, I'm developing artists. Berklee has 5,000 musicians on campus. So it's really just a continuation of this artist development mission that I have. And what has been really, really useful for me is to speak the language where I was able to transfer those skills from the studio and thinking about it and being able to have the language of, like, okay, well, this is how you should be developing your sound. And then how do we align this with your brand strategy? And then how we align this with your marketing like an integrated marketing plan where there's, a social media content strategy and all the digital touch points sort of align with each other, while still maintaining that artistic integrity, while still maintaining that sound. So there's been a lot of really, really interesting parallels and transferable skills that I've been able to use on a daily basis when I'm advising students. And maybe I can reframe that when I'm building and developing artists.
Yeah. And I want to take this sort of question a step further for you, Allyson. And it's really around, like, and I kind of want to hear from everyone on this. And Allyson, I want you to kick us off, but with all of our journeys being sort of so long and so and having so many different sort of stopping points in them, how do you sort of keep focus and not get lost along the way, right? Rio, you and I were talking earlier about how think you're going to start out as one thing and then you end up as another. And so, Allyson, how do you sort of remain focused and remain invested in your own self as you're trying to find your way in your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it's a difficult one. I think for me personally, like, this is like, I can't be another person. Like, I can't do anything else. This is like it for me. It's like, it's so like part of who I am that I can't be anything else. So I feel like I don't really have a choice in it. And so in that, I think that makes one extremely driven and It makes someone curious. And I think that they're the things that like basically have to be at your core. You have to love it so much to, you know, in order to be successful, I think. And obviously you need to have a skill set and you need to learn the tools and everything, but that's, you know, just part of it. It's really being involved in the community. It's being invested in your work and just having a, like, I think at its a core, like a real like passion for it that is just drives you constantly. It's just, it never goes away. How someone gets that, like, it's a bit of an unknown. I think it's just something that people have, you know, when they love it. And I think it goes across a lot of the arts, you know, whether you're a visual artist, whether you're a dancer, whether you're a musician. I think it's just one of those things that is so internally driven inside of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Rio, Chris, do you all have anything you want to sort of add to that or share on like being able to sort of continue to be motivated and driven and invested in yourself as you're sort of working to achieve your dream?
I mean, I'll give the adverse to that in some ways, right? Of like the times when you feel imposter syndrome, the times when I felt like leaving Nashville and becoming a park ranger in Montana, the amount of times that I've thought about doing that, right? When you do have those like moments in your career that feel so detrimental. But I think what I always come back to, similar to what Allyson is saying, is the reason why you got into it in the first place, and then being able to reflect and celebrate the small wins.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the things that I've had to learn this year, because at my point and stage in my career, I'm not entry level necessarily anymore, not executive yet. So we're in the like growing pains of middle management, right? And it's that feeling of, I've just got to do the work and I got to be patient, but I got to continue to control the things I can control and just kind of keep the eye out. You know what I mean? Like this industry is difficult. Someone once said to me, the music business is like an unavailable boyfriend, right? From emotional capacity, right? Because like we're so passionate, like how often does this industry like show us that back, right? And so from the adverse perspective, in terms of like outside of passion, what gets you through the tough days, the small wins and the reflection, and then and I'll also touch on the community that you have around you that also push you, that also build you up in the process as well.
Yeah. Something.
I think that's so important.
No, go ahead, Alex.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like having your community is like everything. You know, it's your peers, it's your friends, it's like the people that you go to talk about this stuff, you know, to build you up when you need to, and to like, you know, commiserate with you as well. You know, that I think that's a huge part of it. Yeah.
I think what's important, Rio, that you touched on too, is that like first of all, middle management is real, right? It's a necessary part of your career journey that you're going to have to sort of deal with. And I think sometimes we are just conditioned to that. Where if we work hard and pay our dues, we'll get to the top, and that's it. And that's a fairy tale that does not exist anymore. That's just reality. What I say to that though is like, you are not going to develop all of the skills necessary for your job, specifically in the role that you're in now. And it is crucial and imperative that you find things outside of your internship, outside of your job, outside of your everyday experience to continue to develop skills that are going to push you for that next role. Because I think there's an idea that as you're in a role with a specific job, that you're going to continue to grow there and grow up the ladders and all of that. And while that is a nice journey to have, it's not everyone's journey. And so what could you be doing outside of your day-to-day, your 9 to 5, your 6 to 10, or whatever it might be, to help you to continue to develop skills that you aren't necessarily getting in your job? Like, for example, for myself, I focus on partnerships and business development. It's all strategy. It's all biz dev. It's all sort of numbers and revenue, right? But I also manage an artist on the outside. So I'm not doing artist development in my role from 9 to 5. So what am I doing outside that's going to make me a sort of a better artist manager for my artists? And so, Chris, that leads me to my question for you. As you were growing in your career, what things outside of your sort of just your 9 to 5 were you doing to help you develop additional skills?
Absolutely. I just want to come back to that previous question and something that Rio mentioned that I think is really, really important around taking time to reflect. And I think for me, once or maybe twice a year, I'll take time to pause and reflect, and I'll do some goal setting. And sort of aligned with that too is just the importance of presence. Early on in my career, I was just going, and I had all these amazing opportunities, and I would go to showcases and festivals and award shows. And, I found myself like being on my phone and putting it on the gram and like taking pictures or whatever. But like, I didn't take the time to actually just pause and savor that present moment. And just to be like, to just feel that gratitude. That actually gets me through a lot of those maybe low times, and just being intentional about finding those things in my life and my career that I can be grateful for. Okay, now coming back to that second question about those things that I was doing, I think the biggest thing that I was doing was that I set out a time every day, whether it was during my commute or while I was eating breakfast, and I would, read Billboard magazine. I would listen to a podcast. I would, go on YouTube and check out maybe some recordings of panels of South by Southwest or another conference, and really, really just trying to keep my finger on the pulse so I can identify like inflection points that are coming, some trends that I should be a part of, maybe some regulatory or policy changes that are going to affect revenue streams for the artists that I was working with. So really just keeping my finger on the pulse, going to those resources, going to Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, Music Connection, and just really taking advantage of those. There's a great podcast out of the UK called Setlist, by a Complete Music Update. It's really dry British humor, but they talk about the global music industry, really, really, funny, interesting. And I think the whole thing, every episode is maybe 10 or 20 minutes max. So just doing that to stay active is something that I was definitely doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, you referenced Billboard and Music Business Worldwide, which are two of my bookmarks, but you're so right in saying and sharing that find resources, or even there's the resources that Chris has just named, that are going to help you stay knowledgeable of what's happening in the industry. Because what will happen is in your reading, what you'll find is not only what sort of skills are up to date, but what skills are also out of date, and also wow, I never heard of this career. This is not, now I can monetize on this. Maybe I'm thinking of pivoting. So it just allows you to be aware of what's going on, so that you can make the best educated decision for yourself and for your career. I love Billboard. I read it every month. It is kind of the Bible that I go by just to know why, but also that's someone's opinion, right? And so find the resource that sort of works for you. Rio, what resources are you sort of using that helps you sort of stay knowledgeable what's happening in the music industry?
Totally. I think similar to you guys, I love when Chris said that it's about what he used to do or maybe still does in his career. I was that dork when I was trying to figure out how to get a foothold in the music industry, of highlighting people in Billboard, adding them on LinkedIn. I had no business of I had nothing to offer anyone, but I was just you know what, I want to try to build my network this way, and just people that I admired in the industry. Right. And in some ways, here in Nashville, the music industry is such a big, it reminds me of a big high school, because once you know one person, you kind of get to know everybody. Right. And I think the music industry industry in that way. Outside of Nashville can be that way too, but just in our small community here, it definitely feels that way. But in terms of the things that I do to not only stay up to date on what's going on, and also just to make sure that I'm building that community around me, the organization that I'm currently the vice president for is Society of Leaders in Development. It's been around for 26 years in Nashville. We celebrated our 25th last year, and we've got an alumni base of just truly exactly the people that are on this panel, exactly the young up-and-coming music industry professionals that are listening to us right now, who wanted to advocate for figuring out exactly these first couple of years of being in the music industry and building a community around that of like-minded folks who also wanted to push each other to continue to excel in their careers. And so that's just one organization that fortunately our Nashville community has, that is a great resource, not only for continuing development, because we do put on different panels similar to All Access Fest, but also there's other organizations that do really great work, like Women's Music Business Association, Women in Music. We have young entertainment professionals here in Nashville. We have the other Nashville Society. So there's a lot of different plugins, at least in my music community, that has a resource for everyone. And I think that's just so wonderful that we have that here in Nashville. Yes.
First and foremost, I'm not sure if you just have my notes in front of you, but you've hit on my next 3 bullets. So I just am very appreciative of that. So one thing you hit on was this sort of, and in my mind, I received it as like community versus like competition. And I think where I'm going with this is that a lot of times creatives and music industry sort of entrepreneurs and enthusiasts are really hesitant to be able to share resources or share space with each other because they feel like there's only there's only a space for one of us, right? Especially when it comes to being a minority in the industry, right? If we're talking about diversity and how it shows up in music, and we think about how it's at the forefront of a lot of these Fortune 500s and a lot of the industry now, like there's only one space for one Black male, one space for sort of one LGBTQ queer member, like, and that's just not the reality. The idea is that like your biggest allies and your advocates and people who are actually going to push you forward will be when you network across and not instead of networking up. So we talked about sort of like reaching out to all the people on LinkedIn. That's great and that makes sense. But I really encourage everyone on this panel today, in the audience today, to sort of look who's beside you, because those are really the people who are going to carry you to the front. And although you all might be at the same level now, in the next 3 to 5 years, that person's going to be the middle management and going to be able to hire you as a coordinator or hire you as an intern or be able to refer you to someone. So that's the first point I want to make. The second one I want to make, and Allyson, I'm going to sort of punt it over to you for this question, is like, how much does location play a part in your career? Rio, you talked about Nashville being a place where you are, and I'm not sure sort of how you ended up there. I know that you moved in 2019, I feel like what you said earlier, but like Nashville is a hub for music right now, specifically country music, but just music in general. And as you said before, like, you know one person, you know them all. It's a small community. And so, Allyson, you talked about coming across the pond, right? And so talk to us about making that decision to coming to the States and being like, this is the location that I need to be in if I want to thrive in film and TV composer. And Chris, I would love for you to piggyback off of that too, in terms of where you are at in your decision in that too.
Yeah, I think, when I came to the US, I moved over here in like 2005. So I've been here a while now. So I think things have definitely changed a lot. There's a lot of, and I mean, to be honest, like COVID has shifted the way that we think about like where people are a lot as well in terms of how you can work remotely and all this kind of stuff, But I mean, for film and TV, I think Los Angeles is still like, the primary hub for people working in the industry, but there's people working. I mean, I know that people are scoring in Nashville as well. They're doing scoring sessions over there. They're doing scoring sessions in Canada. They're in New York. They're in London. So there's communities, and you can build a career, I think, in a lot of different locations. And I think a decision to come to Los Angeles now. I think that one can actually build up a career where they are, and then hop across to LA. Because once you do hop over, obviously, to LA, then you're in a very big pond of people, kind of thing. I think that it's, as far as the industry in Los Angeles is concerned, I think it's super important to be involved in the community, and like what you were saying about like your peers around you, you know, I think like
Allyson, I'm gonna, just because we're short,
especially like with the Alliance for Women Film Women.
Sorry, you were cutting in and out again, and so I wanted.
Oh.
Let's see. Let's try to continue again.
Okay. Yeah. I was just talking about the Alliance for Women Film Composers in terms of like having a community around you and your resources. Also the Society for Composers and Lyricists. If you're a composer that you're in Los Angeles, also, I mean, anywhere really, but if I'm talking specifically about LA, the people that are in the voting academies. They're the people that hire, you know, for orchestrators, copyists, whatever it is. Everyone's part of a community, and knowing your peers and knowing everyone around you and being supportive of each other's wins is like really important. And eventually that comes back around to you. You know, if you're a good citizen, like I think that be really kind to your friends who are in the industry as well, because really that's the way that I think you feel the best about yourself whilst you're like trying to make it as well. And yeah. I think you'll get the most out of it just meeting people and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, just so I want to just briefly sum up what you said, just because you were in and out a little bit, but it really around being able to support your peers in the community, but also being a part of whether it's a TV and Composer Alliance or a guild or wherever sort of your art form is being celebrated and appreciated, like become a part of that, because those are your peers that you're going to have to work and network with. Also, I think something you touched on too was like engage with each other. As specifically, we're talking about like content and like each other's stuff, share each other's things, talk about each other's things. I know so-and-so who's doing so-and-so and doing this and doing that. Like share each other's information, because again, you're only supporting each other, and just that it's going to come around full circle. I think a lot of times in music and entertainment, we're conditioned to gatekeep with our connections, our skills, our reach. And like, I just want to sort of break the chains on that, because if one of us wins, then we all could win. Chris, I'm going to sort of give you 30 seconds to touch base on the location question. Then I'm going to take us into talking about mentorship. I'm going to bring it home.
Great. 30 seconds. Location, I would use the word opportunity. We deal with this with our students all the time. And it also depends on what their objectives are and what their specific skill set is. I think there is a lot of opportunity post-COVID with remote options. But the bottom line is that the hubs, you know, Los Angeles, Nashville, New York, and then depending on the genres too, maybe I would say Atlanta and Miami, they're still very important. Oh, sorry, did I mention New York? These are still very important hubs, and it's far easier to meet people and network with people and have that face-to-face interaction and engagement and be in an office, even if it's a hybrid mode. Yes, there are opportunities remotely, but I would say that depending on what it is that you want to do, I think location is important.
Yes. We have a question in the chat around Chicago, and if you have any thoughts on that being a good place for an artist to thrive or to be a singer-songwriter. I think
if we're talking from the perspective of a developing or emerging artist, I don't think location... I mean, it can lead to different opportunities, but I don't think location is as important, especially not if you're using, sorry, it also depends on the genre too, right? But if you're using social media and streaming and your online presence effectively, I mean, Chicago's a great city. I don't think it really matters.
I think too, what I'll add to that, one, I'm biased because I'm from Chicago, but I think also when I think about Chicago as a city for that, or even just in general, like you talked about is opportunity and genre, right? We know Chicago is a really good place for R&B and hip hop and house music and gospel, and sort of those roots really are there in Chicago. But also when we talk about LA and Nashville, New York, it's less about sort of the genre and the musicality, but also the progression and the speed in which the city is moving, right? Mm-hmm. So when I think about New York and LA and like the skills that are being developed and how one thing is a trend on Tuesday and Friday, it's a whole different world, like that type of sort of pace, you're not going to get like in Atlanta and in Chicago too. So think about like where you want to start and where you want to end for that. I'm at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So just pray for me. I really want to touch on mentorship because I think it's really important. It's a question from Maria in our chat, but like just spitball around. What is one skill? What is one thing that you look for in a mentor and one thing you look for in a mentee? And Rio, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Oh, okay. Mentor. I look for someone who is equally a servant leader. And what I mean by that is someone who is not afraid to, if they're the president of the company and like something needs to get done, they're going to do it no matter whether it's like, you know, a smaller job or something bigger. They're just ready to jump in and just help promote the overall goal of what needs to get done. For a mentee, I look for someone who is hungry for knowledge, who can take advice and be able to come back to me and say, here's how I utilized your advice in X, Y, and Z. That's what I look for in a mentee. Someone who listens, who also just has a lot of questions that they want answered.
Yes. Allyson, one thing you look for in a mentee, one thing you look for in a mentor.
So in a mentor, I think you're looking for someone who's, I think, probably like a leader, but also someone who's like adaptable to change as well, and someone that's willing to look both inward and outward for answers. As far as a mentee, I think like pretty similar to what Ria said. You know, you're looking for someone who's excited, someone who's keen, but someone who wants to learn, and then someone who has a real passion, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Chris, 20 seconds. I'm so sorry to do you again.
All good. Mentor, shared values, and somebody who's maybe an innovator. Mentee, I would like, when I'm evaluating whether or not to take something on as a mentee, I like it when they bring something to the table. They're not expecting me to do everything for them. They're saying, okay, here, Chris, I did all the research. I watched all the videos. Here's what I think my marketing plan should look like. Can we dive into it together? Can you help me with this?
Yes. Yes. Help me help you. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I think we talked on so many different things and we're so all over the place, but in such a good way. And I really hope from what I'm seeing in the chat that our audience, our participants got a lot out of today's conversation. For our audience, thank you all so much for joining All Access Fest. We are not going, and then we're done, but we're not going anywhere. You can connect us with us all on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect and continue to share resources. But with that is our time. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you, speak to you, and hear you at a later date.